Welcome, good people, into this next segment of Improvising through Lent. Our focus this week is going to be on this idea of listen, then respond. Listen, then respond. This week I am sporting my sunglasses because it is way too beautiful not to be outside for this, but it's also way too bright for me to be able to look into the camera without squinting. So here we are. So this idea of listen, then respond. In improv, we use this to explore a number of things, but the biggest idea is that typically we don't listen to one another. There's this buzz phrase lately in almost every world, but very much in the corporate world and around team building, of active listening. Active listening, and that's great. I think that's really valuable because what it's doing is it's putting a focus on the value of listening, which is really important. What I'll say is that a lot of times when we think of active listening, or when we're tasked with active listening, we put so much energy into feeling like we are forcing listening that we essentially stop hearing. And then you have a bunch of people sort of standing around a circle like this, as if that's how they have to listen, right? So what we try to do is think more about the idea of present listening. Just allowing yourself to be fully present in a conversation, in a scene, in a game, whatever it is, so that you're completely and fully listening to what is being offered to you, what is being gifted to you, so that you're then in that position to accept those gifts and then respond. Thus the idea, listen, then respond. But it forces us to listen entirely. I think a lot of us are probably familiar with different scenarios where we start formulating our response about halfway through whatever the other person might be offering us. And then as we're formulating the response, we're not listening to the rest of their offer. And as such, we end up responding to something that was in the beginning of their thought, but may have had nothing to do with what they were actually trying to say. So often, I know I myself do this, but many of us do this, when we need to convey something, and especially if it's something difficult to convey, we'll say a lot of things before that because we're mustering up the courage to say what we need to say. Well, if the person on the other end is responding to those filler thoughts that came first, but not to the thing that's difficult, we're going to feel neglected, we're going to feel abandoned, we're going to feel unlistened to. And that's what we try to avoid. Now, when we look at faith, our relationship with God, love, life, let's take this even deeper. If we're only listening to half of a call, of a sign, of God trying to communicate with us, of those internal monologues, of our conscience, and then we're responding halfway through, then are we actually hearing what the call is in the first place? I think, like all things in life, faith is not excluded. We're trying to rush it all. We're trying to move through it all so quickly. We're trying to anticipate what God might be trying to say to us because we're human. And at the end of the day, our humanity and our intellect gets in the way sometimes. And we try to make pretend that we know what God's intentions are because we've heard enough. When really what we're called to do, especially during the season of Lent, or any period of reflection in any faith whatsoever, whatever faith is yours, those times of reflection, those times of prayer, those times of pause, what we should really be focusing on is that idea of listening, right? Elijah tells us the only thing that is needed to talk to God is a listening heart. It's that idea of God coming in this small, still voice, as opposed to in a thunderbolt, a crash of lightning, or this giant sign. That's not necessarily how it's always going to be. We need to use our listening heart. So that's our goal as we go throughout the rest of Lent. We're winding down our time, but let's use the time that we have left to stop, to reflect, to fully listen, then to respond and act out of that response, so that we do have this cycle that feeds itself, right? If we stop and we reflect, we fully listen, then that full message is going to inform our actions and how we respond. And then if we act out of love, right, love in action, then that love is going to come back into our process of reflection, and so on and so forth. So as you take a pause, perhaps as a Christian during Lent, perhaps just in your own life, perhaps in your own faith, perhaps just in your own prayer, as you take that pause, let's challenge ourselves to fully listen, to not respond before the message has all come across, before it's had a chance to resonate, and then react out of love, react in love, and allow that love to be the source of our actions. So again, this week, it's about listen, then respond. And the best way to do this for God is to do it for one another. So let's be better listeners, let's be better responders, and in tune, we will be better actors, right? People of action. And that action can be out of love in every single thing that we do throughout the course of the day, doing it with love, out of meaningful reflection and out of deep, present listening. All right, good people, enjoy this unbelievably beautiful day. Love yourselves, love one another, and for the love of God, yes, and.